for me.
Yeah, I think
I'm very strong that way.
And I think that you would be good in that kind of a capacity, or any kind of capacity with all guys, because you seem to be tempered.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't do crazy things like with these women. I also think that that's going to change if you get married.
Yeah.
You got to get yourself married.
So there's one act of creation allowed on Shabbos, and that's the act of conception.
What brings that up?
I don't know. I just think it's Shabbat. There's nothing else to do. You're with your lawfully wedded wife.
No. What brings it up in this? Why did you bring that up here?
Well, actually, what brought it up is just thinking about that story with the teacher that I just relayed.
You're reading a parsha that has nothing to do with sex.
That's one of the great things about this week's parsha. Nothing to do with sex.
And yet,
such a relief.
You find a way to work it in. That's the brilliance of Levi. That even when the odds are against him, and it's like talking about like pots and pans and a whole thing about sewing, and he's like,
that's a gift. I'm just a vessel.
Yeah, he's able to find the sex. The sex is the thing that's not mentioned, and let's talk about it. Because last week I talked about how the 39 malachas map to the 39 things that are required for the building of the Mishkan, right? And you mentioned creation. One of the things we say, like for Bona, is that for building, you shouldn't create something. Like, you shouldn't draw something.
Mm-hmm.
You should, we have a thing called nolad. If something wasn't completely created before Shabbos, you can't take any benefit from it on Shabbos. You have to wait till after Shabbos. These kind of things, right? And then you manage to work in, but you can bang your wife and have...
Make a baby.
Make a baby.
Like the little spermies, they swim up to the ovum and they fertilize the egg and they make a baby, Baruch Hashem. Is it okay to brush your hair on Shabbat? Because you can create electricity in sparks.
Do you want the answer to that?
Yeah.
I actually looked it up for you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to read what I wrote down. You can't brush your hair on Shabbos. Shulchan Aruch says in Hilchas Shabbos in Orach Chaim 303:27, you can't brush your hair. But Rav Moshe Feinstein says you can kind of straighten out your hair. Mm-hmm. Just like don't get like really active with it, but not actually brush it. If you use a brush designated, let's say for Shabbos only, this is my Shabbos brush. It's not a really fine comb, and and as long as it's soft bristled. And the problem is that one of the 39 malachas sometimes is translated as combing, and the idea is you're threshing the wheat or something, and you're using a very fine thing, and there's also another problem. Let's say your hair has a knot. There's three problems. One is just going through your hair with a very fine comb, looks very much like the malacha of combing, if you will. That's one problem. Another problem is if plucking is a second problem. If yours combs so hard or you brush so hard that you pull hair out, that's a second problem, plucking on Shabbos. Third problem is what if your hair gets into a knot? A knot that comes into Shabbos and there's a knot. You can't undo the knot. You can't tying a knot or untying a knot. If it's a permanent knot, you can't touch it on Shabbos. So there's three problems potential with your hair. It's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up.
Why does the Torah have so many details on what the priests wear? Because what you wear is profoundly important for the way it affects you and for the way it affects others. The more serious to the yeshiva student, generally speaking, the better he dresses. I act differently in a suit than I act in shorts. People react differently to me when I wear a suit as opposed to when I wear my Borat mankini.
Do you have your Borat mankini?
Not on me right now.
Do you have it? Because I would like to see pictures of that. No, I wouldn't. I'd be scared. Okay. I would ask your question the other way around. Because you said, why does Torah have so many details on what the priests wear, and I would say it's the other way around. We dress like this because we want to look like priests. We take the hint. God says, look, the priest is going to have like all these fancy garments, like all this stuff. He's going to have the hat and the whole thing, right? And we see this is like somebody who's holy, who's representing the Jewish people, and he's acting, doing the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash. He's doing all the service to God. He should dress up nice.
Yeah.
So from that we see that, a Jew should, when he prays and he does his avoda, he should wear a jacket and a hat, right? And look good. That's how I look at it.
So if God hovered over us as he did for the Israelites in the desert, would things be great? Is God just a loving therapist, or would he start judging and smiting? And like, just imagine like God was hovering over you every minute of the day.
Wait a second. I don't even understand the question. God
in
does
the
hover
Pasha,
over.
God is cloud is like hovering over the Israelites,
okay, so
like in a particular relationship.
No.
And a lot of people think, if I just had God hovering over me or with me, things would just be great because God would be with me. But if God's like with you in that intimate way, he's going to be expecting some levels of behavior that are not entirely comfortable for you.
All right, let's break this down. It's not that God was hovering over them. It was called the Anania Kavod, the clouds of glory. It's not that God is there any more or less there. It was that these clouds were there, were protecting them. You know what it says that they protected them from? It says that the enemies would shoot arrows at them, and the clouds would stop. It was like the Astrodome. It was like a Superdome, if you will. And they were like shielded from this thing, and so the enemies would see them and shoot these arrows, but the arrows wouldn't come and land in the camp because they hit the roof, so they couldn't get in. And then it was underneath them too, so that it says that they would walk around, they wouldn't step on the scorpions, because there was all these scorpions in the desert, and they would just be protected from that. Okay, so it was like AstroTurf, if you will. They didn't actually touch the ground. You can imagine that. Okay, so it's not that God was hovering over them, it's just that he created a superdome over them, God is not the superdome. You wouldn't walk into the superdome and go, oh wow, God is here, right? You would just say God has allowed the superdome to be here. So the Anani Kavod, the clouds of glory, are just something that God built for them. I'm going to say that God was just as much hovering over them back then as he is now. The difference is that people today don't recognize it. They don't want to recognize it. Right? They don't want to. It's harder to see God today. There's so much like a Moloch. There's so much doubt out there. It's like, oh, you're crazy to think there's a God today. You're crazy to think that the Torah is the truth. Maybe you're the one who's crazy. You ever think of that? Maybe you're crazy because you actually believe all this garbage that the secularists preach in their religion called secularism. And all of this nonsense like evolution and all this other stuff, you buy into that, and that's fine. I go with the truth. We were there, we saw God, and that's it. What are we talking about?
Thank God there is no sex in this week's Parsha.
Oh, thank God. Woo!
We would learn how the Torah not only removes sex from religion, there are no hookers in the Holy Temple in the Torah world, but it brings religion to sex. So not only removes the hookers from the practice of religion, which was prevalent back 3,000 years ago, but it then takes religion and puts it into the way you conduct your private sex life. So that's a big advance for civilization. I just wanted to share that with you.
I would say it's also the other way around. Because you said it brings religion to the sex. I say it brings the sex into the religion. It's like...
But not into the synagogue.
Not into the synagogue.
Generally speaking, we don't have sex in synagogue.
Right.
On top of Torah.
But wait. But Judaism is a religion that's centered in your home, in your daily life. It's not just in the shul.
Right.
You're right.
Most people, like the Goyim who are listening and the Jewish Goyim who are listening, they think religion, they think synagogue or church.
Oh, I don't.
I know, but
right.
The Goyim.
Okay, go ahead.
So, God is the only thing that does not demand that you compromise your principles. So the stronger you are with God and with your religion, the less likely you are to compromise yourself. But if you're everything else that you serve, your job, your hobbies, your passions, your, I don't know, whatever you get your freak on about, you're going to have constant temptation to compromise your principles to get ahead with your job, with the hot wife next door, with the precious little sister down the street, with the Asian woman behind the donut store,
With the chicks at the Valentine party.
the chicks at the Valentine's party. You're going to be